Everyone. So I realized that I haven't created a SharePoint video for a very long time now. So today we're going to talk about something that's very important, and that is SharePoint permissions. So now I completely understand this is a very difficult topic for most people because it's pretty complex. I get it. But I also think that it's very crucial to talk about it so you don't overshare your documents. You don't delete a group that you shouldn't have, for example. So trust me, it is very, very easy to create a mess with permissions in SharePoint. So with that being said, we're going to go through multiple scenarios, and I'm going to do my best to help you understand how the permissions work in SharePoint. We're going to talk about group connected sites. We're going to talk about non-group connected sites. I'm going to tell you what you should be doing and what you should not be doing. So buckle up and let's talk about
SharePoint permissions.
Before we jump into SharePoint, let's have a look at the permissions visually. So at the top, we would have global admins. And global admins have permissions on the entire tenant. Next, from a SharePoint perspective, we would have SharePoint admins. And SharePoint admins have access to the SharePoint Admin Center, and they have a view on all the site collections within the tenant. Those two permissions are at the Microsoft 365 tenant level. Next in line, we have site admins. And site admins is actually the new name. We used to call them site collection admins. So if you hear site collection admins, they are the site admins of today. Now let's talk about our two different scenarios. We will have not group connected sites and group connected sites. Let's start with the non-group connected sites. Examples of not group connected sites would be a communication site or a team site that is explicitly not connected to a Microsoft 365 group. So what are the different SharePoint groups that we will get by default? And when I say SharePoint groups, it's very important because we need to make the distinction between SharePoint groups and Microsoft 365 groups. First, we will have the site owners, and those have full control over the site. Then we have the site members, and they have edit permissions. We have site visitors with read permissions. And finally, we will have any custom groups that you create with either built-in permissions or custom permissions. Our second scenario is going to be for group connected sites. So what do we have? Well, basically, we have the same thing. So I'm going to copy that. That's the basic, but we have two more groups. So I'm going to make some space. And in here, we are going to have Microsoft 365 group owners and Microsoft 365 group members. Now you can start to see that we're getting a little bit more complexity with group connected sites, but we're not done. I'm going to add even more complexity. The Microsoft 365 group owners and Microsoft 365 group members are going to be nested inside the respective SharePoint group. So that would look something like that. The Microsoft 365 group owners, they are going to be nested with the SharePoint site owners. So I'm going to add something at the end. Nested. And the Microsoft 365 group members, again, nested at the end, inside the SharePoint group. So that is the basic for the hierarchy with regards to SharePoint permissions when you create a group connected site or a not group connected site. Now, let's go into SharePoint and see everything in action. Let's start with a site that is not connected to a Microsoft 365 group. So I've created a site which is called VL Site No Group, and in the document library, I've created two sample documents, a Word document and an Excel document. When I created that site, because my account actually created this site from the SharePoint Admin Center, I was automatically put as a site admin, but I've removed that. So if I go back into the SharePoint Admin Center, I select the site and I go into membership. I've removed myself from the site admins, and you can see here that we have site admins, site owners. I put my account as a site owner. We have site members, we have nobody yet, and we have site visitors, nobody yet either. So just remember that for now, when the site is not connected to a Microsoft 365 group, we only have 4 SharePoint groups as such. So 3 owners, members, visitors, and the site admins that will also be on the Microsoft 365 group SharePoint site. Now let's go back into the site and have a look at the SharePoint groups. I'm going to go to the home site, click on the gear icon, and go into site permissions. Here we can see the site owners, the site members, and the site visitors. And I'm going to click on advanced permission settings. And as I said earlier, we have our 3 default groups, the owners, members, and visitors. If we go into owners, as expected, I have my account in here. If we go into members, we're going to start adding some people so we can use them later in the video. I'm going to click on new. And then I'm going to add Alex. I'm going to click show options because I do not want to send an email, and I'm going to share. Let's go into the visitors group, and we're going to add another user. And now we're going to log as Alex so we can see if there's any differences. And then when I'm logged as Alex, you can see this is just a user. There's no admin role whatsoever. I'm going to paste the URL. And once again, I'm going to go into the gear icon. And here I already have less than my account because we don't have the same permissions. If I click on site permissions, I can see the site owners, site members, and the site visitors, but there's nothing else I can do in here because I'm a site member. I have edit permissions. Let's go back to my account where I'm a site owner, so I have full control over the site. And let's start messing a bit with the permissions. Let's go into the documents library, go back to the gear icon, and this time we're going to choose library settings. More library settings. And here we have permissions for this document library. Let's click on it. And we can see at the top that this library inherits permissions from its parent, the parent being the root site. So we have the same people inside the SharePoint groups. And let's break the inheritance in that document library. In the ribbon, we're going to click on Stop Inheriting Permissions. You have a warning. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm going to click on OK. And now this library has unique permissions. That means that at this point, my library doesn't have the same permissions as the root site. Well, actually, not quite at this point, because if you look right now, we still have the same groups. So if I leave it like that and I don't change anything, then the people inside the groups will still have the same permissions. So if I go into members, well, Alex is still there. When we break the inheritance for the permissions, the point is to give different people different permissions. So if you do this, the point would be to remove those groups from this library to add different groups or different people. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my account because I do not want to be locked out when I'm going to delete those groups. So click on Grant Permissions. And I'm going to add my account. I want to share everything. Again, I don't want to send an invitation. I'm going to put myself again as an owner. So full control. And at least I'm not going to be locked out while I'm doing the demo. We can refresh the page. And now you can see that my account has been added. Now, good practice is to add users into SharePoint groups. See a SharePoint group as a container that will have a permission level defined. And so when you add multiple people into a group, you don't have to assign a permission separately. So that's the best practice. Now it's time to delete those groups. So let's select them. And in the ribbon, we click on Remove User Permissions. Once again, are you sure you want to do this? Yes. Now I'm the only one who has access to this document library. If we go back into Alex, and you can see that I still have the documents library here. Now I'm going to refresh the page. And now it's gone. Permissions are working 100%, if not more, to be honest. I have never seen in my experience an issue with permissions. Let's go back into my account. And actually, I'm going to modify that a bit. If you think that you've made a mistake at this point and you do not want that library to have unique permissions, you can go into the ribbon, delete unique permissions, your custom permissions will be lost, and then the unique permissions are going to be removed and the groups are going to come back. A word of caution with that. Right now, I'm doing this. I only have one document. If you have millions of documents with custom permissions or custom groups or anything like that, you need to be very careful, okay? I'm just showing you how you can do it. But one thing you have to know with SharePoint is it's not because you can do it that you should, okay? So be very careful with that. If I go back to Alex and refresh the page, now the documents library is back. Talking about the SharePoint groups in here, you cannot have different people in the same group. I cannot have a members SharePoint group with 10 people inside for this particular document library. And then I create another document library where I add this group and have only 5 people in that group. If I remove somebody from the members group, then this person will not have access to any other documents library where that specific group is assigned. Let me show you. For example, in the visitors group, we have Angela. I'm going to select Angela. I'm going to go to Action, Remove Users from Group. And I'm going to go into Owners and add a new user. Now, Angela is part of the Owners group. First thing, I'm going to go back to the SharePoint Admin Center and I'm going to refresh the page. Let's go into the Site Owners. And now you can see that Angela has been added in here. And if I go into the Documents library, gear icon, library settings, permissions for this document library, owners, she's there. Now the root site, she's obviously going to be there because we've seen the membership in the SharePoint Admin Center. Site permissions this time. Site owner, she's there. Advanced permission settings. Again, this is a similar page. I'm going to owners and she's there as well. So remember that every time that you move a user around between different groups, as long as this group is assigned in a document library or a SharePoint list, the user will follow with that group. Now let's go into the documents library and I'm logged as myself. I'm a site owner, so I have full control over the site. What I'm going to do is crescendo. After the document library, I'm going to break permissions at the item level, meaning at the document level. Let's go into the 3 dots and click on Manage Access. Here I can see who has access to that specific document. Nobody individually. We have our 3 SharePoint groups, the owners, the visitors, and the members. And the first thing that you really need to think about is when you need to break permissions or share a document individually, please ask yourself if the document is at the right place. Again, this is not because you can that you should do it. You really want to keep it simple. Here I'm just doing the demo with one document, but imagine you have thousands of documents that have been shared with different people. It's going to be a mess. And now I'm just about to show you how to make a bigger mess. as you can see here, I have the visitors group and the members group, and it says the visitors can view and the members can edit. All right, that's the built-in permission. That's fine. Now I'm going to click on members, and I can change the permissions for that specific group if I want to. So let's do something in here. The default for members is that they have edit permissions. There's another set of permissions in here. They can review, they can view, or cannot download, or even worse, remove the access to that group for that document. Let's change from edit to can view only. So that means that it's going to look very similar to the visitors group. And I'm going to click on apply. Changes have been saved. Great. Let's close this. And let's go back to Alex. Remember, Alex is part of the SharePoint group's members, so should have edit permissions everywhere that this group is assigned to. Let's first refresh the page just to make sure. And let's go into the documents library. If I go into the test plans, which I have not changed anything, I'm part of the members group, and I'm going to open the document. I can go on and I can make some changes. Made some changes. I'm going to go back to my document library. And as you can see, this has been changed a few seconds ago by Alex. So far, so good. Now, if I go into the Word document, you can see that I'm not able to do anything. It is view only. It is basically working the change that I've made to this specific group and for that specific document. But again, imagine how confused you would be if you had to troubleshoot all of this, because the same SharePoint group can have different permissions either at the root site or the library and at the document level. And if I hover over it, you can see there's this pencil that is strike through there. That means it's only a view permission. Compared to the other one, you can see that I'm able to edit the document if I want to. Be very, very careful when you want to change permissions at the document level. Let's talk about group connected sites. I've created a Microsoft Teams team, and because I've created it, I'm set as an owner, and I've added Alex as a member. If we go into the general channel, click on files, we have the SharePoint site that is associated with it. If I open it, and then I go into the site permissions. So again, gear icon, site permissions. I will have the site owners, which this time is the Microsoft 365 group. The members, again, Microsoft 365 group members. And for the visitors, I have nobody. Let's go into advanced permission settings. And again, this page should seem familiar. We've seen that before. Those are the 3 default SharePoint groups. And if I go into owners, I see nothing, but that's explicit. If I go into members, here I can see what seems to be the exact same thing, but it's not. Again, that's what I mentioned earlier at the beginning. The confusion between the team site name and the group name. They are basically the same. So if you click in here, you can see that this group has an email address. That is the Microsoft 365 group. I'm going to create a document library. I'm going to go back to the home site, click on new document library. A blank document library will be fine. I'm going to call that quickly testing and create. I'm going to go into that document library settings. And again, permissions for this document library. This library inherits permissions from its parent. That's the default. We haven't broken the permissions. I'm going to go into the site members. And here I also have my Microsoft 365 groups because those are the same permissions that I have at the root site. So far, so good. You could start breaking the permissions on that document library, but we've been through that, so I'll spare you. Remember that this document library is actually completely separate from the Microsoft Teams team that I've created earlier. you might be aware, but in case you're not aware, every channel in Microsoft Teams is a folder in SharePoint, okay? It's not a document library. And those folders are located in the built-in documents library. Let's close this and go into the documents library. And this document library is tightly linked to the Microsoft Teams team that I've created. So we're going to play around with this one. And if we go again into the library settings, you might think that everything's the same. Go into the members. We have our Microsoft 365 group. So let's play around with this and let me show you what not to do. Let's do the unthinkable on that specific documents library. We're going to break the permissions in this one. I'm going to give myself full control so I'm not locked out. And I'm going to remove those groups. I'm going to go into Teams, again with my account. I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to go into Manage Team, and I'm still an owner. If I expand the members, I can see that Alex is still a member. But if I go into Alex, I had access before. I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to try to open the SharePoint site. Let's go into Files and look at what we have. Because this documents library is very much linked to Microsoft Teams, if we start breaking the permissions, we're going to be in trouble. If you think about troubleshooting that, if you had, for example, Alex coming to you and say, oh, I have an issue when I go into the general channel, I cannot go and access the site for that specific document library. Well, you may have some issues trying to understand because you can see that Alex is still a member on your team. If I try to grab the site URL, so let's go back into Documents. I'm just going to copy this and try to bypass it. It says I don't have access to it. So please, please, please do not break the permissions on the documents library if the SharePoint site is linked to a Microsoft Teams team. Let's go back to a functional state. I'm going to go back and reset the permissions. And going back to Alex, refresh, going to Teams, refresh as well. And we should be back in business. Another example of what not to do when your site is linked to Microsoft Teams or has a group in the background is to start breaking permissions on folders or files directly. So in that case, I am linked to Microsoft Teams. If I go into the general channel, I currently have no documents, so I'm going to create one quickly. And I'm going to break the permissions on this folder. Click the three dots, Manage Access, same screen as we had before. With regards to the groups, now I have the usual suspects, the SharePoint groups, and I also have my Microsoft 365 group. And this time we're going to do something different. We're still going to go into the members, and we're going to do something that you should not be doing. We're not going to change that to view. We're going to choose remove the direct access. So Alex currently has access to this because he's a member. And so he has edit permissions at this point in time via the Microsoft 365 group. So I'm going to remove the access. And now we only have the owners and visitors for the SharePoint groups, but still the Microsoft 365 group. And I'm sure that at this point, you can imagine exactly what's going to happen, because if we remove the SharePoint group where the Microsoft 365 group was nested inside, then Alex is going to have a problem. So let's switch to Alex and refresh. The channel appears, but let's go into the Files tab. And once again, we have an issue. Even though Alex is still a member of that team, but we've done something different in the SharePoint site. So that means that we cannot access this folder directly through the Files tab in Microsoft Teams. However, what is actually going to happen if we go straight into the SharePoint site? Let's go into the URL of the root site. We go into Documents. We can even expand the in channels. We have the general folder in here, but not in the site library. If we click on General in here, we have an error. You can imagine the kind of issue that your users are going to have if you start messing around with that Documents library when it's linked to a Microsoft Teams team. Now, I know it's been a lengthy video, but I wanted to take the time to explain really different things for the permissions. And there's just one last thing I would like to show you. And that is when you have a SharePoint site that is connected to Teams or a Microsoft 365 group, and you want to share the site only. We go to the root site. I'm going to go to the gear icon, Site Permissions. And here at the top, I can share the site. Underneath that, you have site sharing settings. So you can change how you want your site to be shared. Who can share your site? So you have 3 different options in here, but I'm going to leave it as it is for now. The thing that's important in here is the distinction between sharing the site only or adding members. If I click on adding members, I can choose from add members to group or share the site only. Let's start by adding members to the group. So when you do this, it's going to add this person not only into the groups, but obviously into Microsoft Teams as well. If I click on Add Member, here you have a description to make sure you understand what you're about to do. And we're just going to add somebody in here, somebody completely different, so you see how this is going to impact the team. I'm going to add this person. I can choose between a member or an owner. Let's put that person as an owner and click on Save. If I go back into Teams and refresh the page, let's go into Manage Team. And now you can see that this person has been added as an owner on the team. Okay, so be very careful when you do this. You're not only sharing the site, you're also adding this person, whether as an owner or as a member within that team. Let's close this and let's share the site only. If I click on Share Site Only and I add somebody else, then I can choose between Edit, Read, and Full Control. I can send an email to that person and click on Add. Now, this person is not going to be added to Microsoft Teams nor the group. This person will only have access to the SharePoint site. However, let's have a look at what John is actually seeing. Now that I'm logged as John, you can see that I don't have access to that team. However, if I go into the SharePoint site, I can access it because it's been shared with me. I can go into the Documents library. I can see the general folder. I can see the document. Remember, I have edit permissions. So let's click on the document. Looks like I can make change to it. Let's go back to the folder. And you can see that John has made some changes a couple of seconds ago. So despite the fact that I don't have access to the team, I can still see the folders, aka the channels. So be very careful of that as well. And if I go back into the documents, I have the in channels in here. And obviously I have an issue in here because I'm not added to the team. That's one way that John would be able to see the documents with edit permissions if only the site has been shared with him. Another thing that could actually happen as well is that you would have a link in here that would say go to channel. And then if John was to click on this, he would actually request to join the team. And then the owners of that team could accept or reject the request. All right, that's it for this video. I know it's been very complex and we've seen so many different scenarios, but I hope you feel a little bit better about SharePoint permissions.